I'm going to start with a quick recap of what we covered in Premiere. You can import your footage by double-clicking in the project panel or going File, Import, or you could just click and drag from your Finder. So I'm just going to click and drag like that. All of my footage is shot at the same frames per second and same aspect ratio, so I don't have to worry about any of that. In the project panel, I have mine set to list view. This right here is thumbnail view. Thumbnail view, if you don't know what your footage looks like, it's a pretty fast way of seeing what each clip is, and you use this to zoom in or out, making it larger, and then you just click back there to go to the list view. Since this was all shot the same, I just pick one clip, right-click, and choose New Sequence from Clip, and that just makes sure that it's the right frame rate and aspect ratio and duration, all that. Since they're all shot the same, you could just drag them all into your timeline, like such. The main panels are the project panel, that's where you assemble all your clips, the timeline, the source panel over here, the source monitor, and the project monitor. If I double click on a clip in the project panel, that opens it in the source monitor. The source monitor just shows what your footage looks like before you put any effects on it. The program monitor shows where you are in your timeline. Basically last week we covered, you just move the playhead to where you want, and the amateur way of editing is just grabbing the edges like that and changing it. That's the in point and the out point of the clip. I'm going to undo that. Another way to edit is I can edit in my timeline, my source panel, by moving my playhead. This is called scrubbing. I could click here to choose my endpoint or hit the letter I on my keyboard, move my playhead to where I want it to end, and choose the letter O for my out point, or click here. The gray part is what the viewer will see. The part before the in point is called the head. The part after the out point is called the tail. So it's the head, the in point, what the viewer is going to see, the out point, and the tail. That's basically your terminology. I and O set your in and out points. If you want to get a clip out of the source monitor that way, you just click and drag and you get both the audio and the video. If you only want the video, you click on the film strip right there. And if you only want the audio, click on the audio strip. And a reminder, this is the sequence. The sequence is what's in your timeline, kind of like compositions in After Effects. This is the video clip. The purple film strip means there's video, and the green down here means there's audio. So this is audio and video for these three. This song I brought in, it's just a green wave file. So this lets you know this is audio only. And you can always keep your project panel clean by adding folders like FTG for footage. Then you just drag it in there. And I normally make one for my sequences. I usually call that SEQS. And I'm going to name this. I'll call this demo. And you see a change right here in my timeline. So you can have multiple sequences open. It's when you're working. I'm going to make a new timeline from this one by right-clicking, new sequence from clip, and here it is. I'm going to rename it. I'll call it Rough Cut. And I'm going to drag it out of my footage into my sequence folder. So I'm going to just drag every clip that I downloaded and put them in the same timeline. And I'm going to hit save. You want to save frequently because Adobe is garbage. All right. So the way to edit professionally. Now here's where we're going to start getting into the more professional way of doing it. So I threw all the clips. Let's pretend there's the whole shoot of B-roll at the aquarium, and I named it Rough Cut. What you do this way, you've got everything. So like when you shoot an interview, you throw it all there to find where the story is. You make a timeline for your B-roll, etc. And, you know, let's pretend this was something different. I would right-click, make it a sequence, name it, and then I'd have a different sequence. Like if it's part of the interview, I call it interview. So I've got my rough cut. This is all my original footage. What I do is I right-click on it in the project panel, and I choose duplicate. I'm going to name this Edit 1. Then you have to double click to open it. So here's Edit 1. Let's pretend I didn't want this first clip. See, it's still there in Rough Cut. Working this way is non-destructive, and each pass you have with your clients, just duplicate it. Like if I get changes after this, I duplicate Edit 1, call it Edit 2, double click to open it, and make the changes in Edit 2. That's how to edit professionally. You don't lose any of your work that way, and you work non-destructively. Now, I showed you before you could click and drag the edges to, cut, but the professional way of doing it really is where the playhead is, selecting the clip, however many you have in your stack, and hitting Command or Control K for cut. And that sets a cut right there. The up and down arrow keys take you from cut to cut. The left and right arrow keys take you forward or back one frame. You want to, as I said before, you want to come in on a good frame, go out on a good frame. Use only your best footage, use only your best takes, and then you assemble them in the timeline in the order you want to tell it. So you get that level of precision using the left and right arrow keys to dial in. And there's your time code. Reminder, time code goes hours, minutes, seconds, frames. So we went over the basics of editing. Now I'm going to show you a quick reminder of this. If I want to close up this gap, I can just right click and ripple delete, and it will close where the nearest edges meet. So be careful of that. I was moving everything around from layer to layer with the selection arrow. The track forward or back moves multiple clips from wherever you have your playhead at. So that's the difference between those two tools. And it's good to work layered. Like if I have a multi-camera shoot, let me open up that real quick. And when you're working, you want to keep your files together and in folders. It's usually just the best way of working. I used stacked cameras. I had to sync up both cameras in the timeline. And what I did for this is I made a layer. You can always make a layer by right-clicking in the gray area and choosing Add Track, and that will add a track to either the video. This is the video section with all the V's, and the audio section's down here. So to add another layer, just right-click and choose Add Track. When I'm working on interviews, so I shoot with multiple cameras and I stack them. And then whatever camera I'm not using, I move up to the invisible layer. This clicking the eyeball will show or hide. So that's the camera that I'm not using. And this whole layer, nothing on it will be visible. So this way I can still keep the cameras lined up and the clip I'm not using is on top. And M mutes, S solos. So if you've got multiple layers of audio, S will solo just the track you have selected. All right, so you can quickly see how layers help you save time, and the track forward or back is a great way of keeping clips together without having to re-edit them and still move them around in your timeline. Don't forget, the playhead in the program monitor is where you are in your timeline that the viewer is going to see. Now we're going to tackle keyframing in Premiere. Here's my image right here. Let's pretend I want to do the Ken Burns effect with this photo. I would click on it once, and then in my source monitor over here, right above it is Effects Controls. This is where you keyframe in Premiere. Premiere is not good at keyframing. You want to do your keyframing a minimum in Premiere. It's always better to do motion design in After Effects. But you see right here, motion, twirl that down. There's your 4 pillars, your position, scale, rotation, opacity. They're all here. So if I want to do Ken Burns with like a subtle zoom in, I move the playhead where I want it. I click the stopwatch I want to animate. I go forward however long I want my zoom to be, and then I make my change. And just like that, you've got the instant Ken Burns effect in Premiere. And here's how you zoom in and out of your timeline. Right here with these circles, same thing down here. Or you can move the playhead and press the plus or minus keys on your keyboard. It will zoom in and out from where your playhead is, so be careful of that. I usually move my playhead to the beginning when I'm zooming in and out, just so that I can see my timeline at whatever scale I want it. Let's pretend I'm going to have a title right here. Great title, and the font is perfect, and everything's amazing. You could use the arrow tool to move this around. You could also grab a corner and scale it up. No surprise there. If you want to edit this, you can go to your effects controls and you'll see text here. I twirl down. This is where you can change the font, as well as all the size and the rest, as you know from After Effects, fill, drop shadow, etc. That's how you work with type. Another thing you could try is going Window, Essential Graphics, and this is where you get to templates. And sometimes when you're working with text in a template, you edit it over here in the edit panel. So you could always close that when you're done by clicking the hamburger menu and close panel. I'm in the editing workspace. That's Window, Workspace, Editing. That's usually where I do most of my work. So like we said, your source monitor, your program monitor, your project panel, these are your tools for editing. We've covered the selection tool and the track forward, track backward tool. Here's your timeline and the different tabs. We've covered the video tracks and the audio tracks. Over here is your audio meter. You see right there, it shows you what level the volume's at. You do not want to go into the red at 0. That's called clipping, and it will be distorted. You add transitions between clips or at the beginning or end of a clip. To get to your transitions, see the little double white arrow here? I want my effects. That's down in my project panel. If it gets closed by accident, just go Window, Effects, and that's how you bring it back. That's how you bring back anything that's closed if you don't see it. So there's video transitions, and I'm going to just do, you could also type in here, dip to white and dip to black. I'll just grab dip to black, and I'm going to put it between the two cuts, move it there. Let me delete that. See, I have the effect. Now it's going to work. That's fine. It says there's not enough time for the transition. I edit it in my effects controls, but I've got to have it selected. See, now it's selected. And let's say instead of 1 second, 6 frames, let's try 20 frames. And center at the cut, that means it's between clip 1 and clip 2. You can always click Show Actual Source, and it's fading from black right into there. So that's how you add a transition. Add them between the cuts. You change the duration of it right here, and if you want to have it centered or start or end at a cut, pretty cut and dry, no pun intended. This top track is the interviewee, and these are some song choices. This song didn't make the cut, so I just muted it. I'll delete it just if there's less to worry about. So I'm just going to scrub at the person talking, and look right here. When I'm doing interviews, I try to get the voice to be somewhere between -9 and -6. So around -6 decibels is the sweet spot I want to hit if it's good audio recording. That gives me a little bit of leeway. If they start talking loud, then it won't get clipped and blown out. So I found that out by scrubbing right here. -6 is the loudest part of the interview. Now if I go to my music and I scrub my music, you'll notice as I scrub through, it's roughly hitting around -18. I did that on purpose so that the music's in the background, but it's not so loud you can't hear the person being interviewed. So you gotta do it by ear, but you could also look at it mathematically. What's gonna look like is, let me unmute her. -6 is still the loudest she is, and the music's around -18. So you hear both of them, and they sit in the mix. Actually, while we're talking about audio, Adobe Premiere and After Effects are very, very picky with their audio settings. Edit, Preferences, Audio Hardware. Every time you plug something in or out of your laptop while you're using Audition, Premiere, or After Effects, it will mess up your settings. So you got to go back in and change it every time you're doing that. So if you're going out to a speaker system, that'd be your out. Your in is what's coming in. So you see my microphone coming in, which makes sense. And then the out, let's do this. Let's see if the overhead speakers are going to work.
Business for all
Is that coming out my laptop? Okay, so I'll rewind it a little so you can hear it.
Welcome to Party with Genies, where we take your gathering to the next step.
So here you hear the music, you hear the interviewee, and I'm going to show you a little something else while we're talking about audio. So first, your audio hardware is where it's coming in or out of. Now, when I'm shooting interviews, this is the audio effects I put on in Premiere. Like if I got a quick deadline and I can't clean it up in Audition for like removing noise and things like that, like getting in at a granular level, Audition's better. But for quick fixes, you can get by with Premiere in a pinch if you've got decent enough audio. So I'm going to go to my double arrow, effects. We saw your transitions are in video effects. There's also a section for audio effects. There's also some video effects, we'll go into that in a sec. Oh, I gotta clear my search history right there. Now we see it. Okay, this is the order I apply these effects, and I'll go over them one at a time. First thing I do is I DeNoise. That's under Noise and Restoration. There's DeNoise. You throw it on, it starts off way too strong. It starts off at 40, which is ridiculous. The higher this is, the more it's going to cut into the person speaking. I usually go anywhere between 3 and a maximum of 20. But normally, you get a pretty decent result between like 3 and 10. You do it by ear. You want the person's voice to sound its best. That was noise reduction, DeNoise. And I just twirl down the arrow to know once I like it. Next thing I do is DeReverb. If there's any echo left over from taking out the noise, you hit edit. The more you go with your DeReverb, the more it's going to cut into the person's voice, the worse it's going to sound. I normally do between 1 to maybe 7, but it all depends. If you've got a nice, dry, clean recording, you don't even need this step. This is just how to take out some of the reverb and the echo when someone's talking. So I start off with a little bit of denoising and DeReverb. My next thing I do is I add some contrast to the quality of the audio by adjusting the EQ. So that's under Filter and EQ, and I choose Parametric Equalizer. I hit Edit, and I do the drop down, and I go Vocal Enhancer. Vocal Enhancer, basically, you're good to go. It did a high pass. What that means is what's not in the human range, it potted it down. So things like rumble and airplanes, they'll be less dominant and present if you're doing audio in an uncontrolled environment. And that adds a little bit of clarity, brings up your brights a little bit. Now, quick explanation, you go, well, what's a parametric equalizer? So I'm gonna close this and throw on a 10-band graphic equalizer, and I'll hit edit. 10-band graphic equalizer, if you've ever had an old stereo around the house or an old car radio, this is it. These are your mids, and that's like your mid-high, there's your highs. You just slide them up or down to adjust the frequency. Parametric equalizer goes mid-low, it goes low, mid-low, mid-high, mid. And then high. Breaks up into 5 sections. So it's easier to work in this split up by 5. Like here's your mid-low, low, mid-high, high. And there's your frequencies up there of like how high or low the sound is. And like I said, vocal enhancer in the drop down usually does good for most situations. All right, so once I cleaned up the EQ, the next step I do is under amplitude and compression. Dynamics processing. Throw that on there, and I hit edit. From the drop down, I choose vocal limiter. What this does, I use the quick expression, cutting the tall grass. And I'll explain that in a second. I'm holding down Alt and mouse wheeling to make my sound wave taller. That's how you can zoom in and out, like making your layer bigger. Then I'll zoom in here. So you see how there's inconsistency. This is quiet. Okay, how to read a sound wave. The shorter it is in height, the quieter the sound is. The taller it is in height, the louder the sound is. The wider a sound wave, the deeper the sound. The tighter a sound wave, the higher pitched the sound. So that's what you can tell just by looking at it. So this is a lot quieter than that. What dynamics processing does is it's going to go through and cut the tall grass. So if I've got anything louder than like -6 decibels, I cut it down so it's shorter in height, and then I can bring up the rest of the volume a little bit more. Then I'll hit it with another dynamics processor, cut the tall grass, and that's how you can level out your audio pretty quickly. If you raise your audio too much, you'll get a little bit of distortion to the audio. But if you're subtle about it, it's a fast way of leveling it and making sure it's not too loud. So use your ear and do what sounds best. So trim the tall grass. Once I've got it pretty much leveled and sounding good, I then throw dynamics on it if need be. I hit the edit. The way dynamics work is I hit limiter. This is going to prevent it from going above -6 decibels. And I hit compressor. That's going to try and make the volume a little bit more uniform. The last one I use is auto gate. Auto gate is the most dangerous. I'm going to scrub through. See that? A lot of it is being clamped, meaning it's not being allowed to breathe. It's going to sound a little phony and fake. This is set too high. So if I turn the dial to something more like -55, let's watch it again.
Where we take your
I'm getting less of a warning. I do this by ear. I usually give it some allowance. I'd rather have the vocals breathe, but what this is going to do is it's going to say anything that's quieter than this, it'll silence it. So if, say I'm giving a lecture and there's someone at the back of the auditorium and they're clicking a pen and it's driving you crazy, but it's so quiet, AutoGate is a way of getting rid of that. So it saves you some time editing. It's saying if it's quieter than this, just get rid of it. So be careful, because you can, when people trail off speaking, listen to the parts they trail off, not when they're projecting and doing well. Listen to them trail off. That's when you know how to set your AutoGate level. And then finally, the last effect I use with audio is under amplitude and compression, Multiband Compressor. Again, you hit edit. One of two of these I always use. I either use Classical Master or Broadcast. When I'm doing my YouTube videos, I do Broadcast because it gives a little bit more presence and it fits the format of an online tutorial. When I'm doing interviews, I choose Classical Master because it smooths things out and has it retain that natural airiness to it. So you choose one of those two and you hit the spacebar while you're watching.
To the next level.
And then your gain. Sometimes it makes your audio a little quieter, so you might need to slide the gain up 1 or 3 decibels. And again, it's nice and loud without hitting the red. You do not want to hit 0. That's clipping. That's when it'll be distorted. So if you need to, you adjust your volume right there. I usually choose Classical Master, Broadcast, and those are my audio settings for cleaning up in Premiere. You could also choose any clip you want and either adjust the volume uniformly or keyframe it to make it fade in or fade out. Make sense? Okay. Let me zoom out by holding down Alt or Option and mouse wheeling to make that a little bit smaller. All right, yeah, and then like with the level here for the song was fairly quiet, so I didn't have to quiet it down too much, but sometimes you might have to go like -20 decibels or whatever when you're doing that. You could use this double arrow to see more sequences in your timeline, like such. So here's one of my lectures. Let me go to a lab because the lab has music. I'm going to zoom out. Here's a little cheat. The music I pick for my YouTube videos is usually pretty loud, and it's louder than my speaking voice. So here's what I do. I throw it all on the timeline and I stagger it so that doing it this way, I can have the songs overlap so that there's no gaps in the music and it has a nice natural flow to it. So, I line them up this way. And here's how you lower multiple tracks at once. You just select them all, right click, choose audio gain, and set it. I usually do like -20 decibels because the music's loud, and then I hit OK. And that's how you adjust the volume of a bunch of tracks quickly. And then you listen to it by ear and say this one needs to be a little bit louder. So I select just that one and I go to my level and I'd adjust it until it's at a good volume. Always watch your bars and work that way. Question was, is the standard for most videos to try and be around -6? I try to be at around -6 because commercials are loud and I don't want someone to have to raise the volume up on my videos and then a loud commercial comes in and it damages their hearing. One of the reasons that commercials are so loud is because they're overly compressed. The more you compress a file, I showed you those talls and those valleys, those loud and quiet parts. The compressor crushes everything to be more uniform in sound so people can make it louder that way because things aren't getting quiet or, there's not too much fluctuation in it. So that's just a little, tip right there. I try to make my stuff louder because, like I said, I would feel really bad if someone blew out a speaker or something like that trying to watch one of my videos when the next video is twice as loud. I'll grab this B-roll. Let me mute this so we don't have to watch it. Let's say I want to speed up this clip. I select it, right-click, speed duration. Now, same with same with After Effects. Watch your duration. This is 46 seconds. So if I go 200, that's half the duration. That means I sped it up. So going higher will speed it up. Going lower will make it slower and longer. Okay? There's also reverse speed. This is how you make video clips and animations play backwards. So if I click that, click OK, and you'll see the clip play backwards. Yes, there's a button. Sometimes, this had no audio to it, but if you had a clip with audio, there would be an option to click on to say, don't play the audio backwards. When I shoot multiple takes. So that's why my timelines look like this. But if you're ever handed a project that's one long clip, like I'll bring in one of my old lectures. So I'll go to import. This is one big take, okay? So say you get a video file like this, where it's the whole thing. There's multiple cuts, there's motion graphics, everything's going on. Here's how you can try and find scene detection. So if I click on the clip in the timeline, right-click, scene edit detection. And I just hit analyze, and this will run in the background, and it'll try and find the cuts that the camera made, like from scene to scene or shot to shot. Now there's fancy transitions and whatnot in here, but see, here's what it did. You see all the cuts it made. And it's kind of on, so that's one way of getting some quick work done. If you've got one big file that you need to chop up quickly, try scene cut detection, may save you some time. Now we're going to get into some pro level stuff. You're going to need at least 3 video clips in your timeline to follow along. Ask me if you got questions. This is what this part's for. I'm taking it slow. All right? Does everyone agree with me when I say video editing is a lot easier to learn than motion design? Okay, you can see why I'm going a little bit quicker. I'm showing you the big concepts here. Okay, what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to get rid of this short clip. And I'll get rid of this short clip too. I'm just right-clicking to ripple delete. All right. Everyone see how I've got 3 fairly long clips. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to randomly shorten, I unlink these. So if you right-click and choose unlink, that'll separate the audio and the video. Conversely, to join them back up, right-click and choose link. You got to have them both selected. So, all right, it was just the first one. I'm going to shorten the beginning and end. Oh, it did it again. Oh, well. I'm trimming both sides of this, the beginning and the end. And I mentioned last class, don't forget there's 2 sides to every cut. There's the part before the cut and the part after the cut. So that's going to affect the flow and the timing of your edit. So I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. So if I've got a 1/4 second on this side of the cut, and then a 1/4 second on that side of the cut before there's anyone talking, that's a 1/2 second of silence, even though the video's still moving. So think about those pauses that let your edit breathe. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in here. Three clips. I shortened the beginning and the end of all 3 clips. That means there's a head and a tail that you're not seeing, okay? And just a reminder, you can always drag back like that to get your clip the length it was. This is non-destructive editing, okay? This is called non-linear editing, NLE, non-linear editing. You're editing it on a computer and you can bring back parts you cut off. I'll do the slip tool, the slide tool, then the difference between a rolling edit and a ripple edit, and that should be everything. All right, middle clip. There's more on this side of the cut and that side of the cut that you're not seeing. So just remember that. Right here are where some of your editing tools are, the little fly out right here. But we're gonna go below the razor. There's the slip tool and the slide tool. Has anyone used the slip tool or the slide tool before? They do the exact opposite of each other. And I'm going to explain the difference and why you use one and when you use the other, okay? We're going to want the slip tool. I use this saying, you slip under the covers and slide over the hood of a car. Slip under, slide over, okay? Here's what that means. I've got my slip tool selected. I'm hovering over my middle clip. There's extra footage. I edited out at the beginning and the end. When you're shooting, you normally want to have extra footage. Gives you flexibility editing. Make sense? All right. Now, I'm hovering over the video track. I'm going to click and drag to the left. The top left thumbnail is the out point of the clip before it. The top right thumbnail is the in point of the clip after it. So the top line shows the out point before this and the in point after it. Does everyone understand that part so far? The bottom, the large part, you're seeing the top is not moving because we're not changing the in point or the out point on either side of this. What we're doing is we picked a certain amount of time and we're finding the best length of that clip inside it. So I'm going to undo that and show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to go to the 10-second mark, exactly 10. Don't forget you type in 10.00 because 10 seconds. Otherwise it'll be 10 frames. So I'll trim right here and I'll make this a little longer. So this is exactly 10. Let's say it's exactly 3 seconds we want. I'll cut here with the Command K because that's where the playhead is. And right click and choose ripple delete. So I've got 3 seconds, okay? This is going to be, you're going to use this a lot for like commercial work, editing your motion reel and your video reel, because you'll have a bunch of short shots. Now, how do you get the best footage inside that? That's the slip tool. I said this is going to be 3 seconds. So I've got my slip tool. I hover over and I drag. On the left, that is going to be my new in point, and on the right is my new out point. So one of the rules of editing, you want to come in on a good frame, and you want to go out on a good frame. So I want the best 3 seconds inside this clip. Like now I'm starting to see more of the jellyfish. And over on the right, that's where the jellyfish, right before they leave the screen, I'm going to want to come out on. So let's see what that looks like now. And those are the 3 seconds I chose to show. It's the fastest, easiest way of having a set length for a clip and finding the best footage inside that length. Does everyone understand that? Now get ready. I'm going to go to the slide tool. Slide, okay, slip tool, slip under the covers. The clips on each side did not change their length, and we just slid this underneath them to find the best section in between them. Everyone got that? Okay, now I've got the slide tool. I hover over the video clip and I drag, and this is what's happening. The top's not changing. That's the in and out points for the middle clip. What we're seeing on the bottom is on the left, that's the out point for the clip before it, and on the right, that's the in point for the clip after it. So if you look in my timeline, you see the borders on each side of this clip changing as I drag. It's keeping the length of the clip in the middle and changing where the clips around it start and end. That's what the slide tool does. And I can see my out point right there, the seal's fighting, and the crab right in the middle, so I'll just click there. My timeline's the same length, but I've got a different length for the clip before and after. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips. I'm going to make each clip 2 seconds long, okay? So that's going to make 10 seconds long total. And you see how I'm just using timecode for this, just to make it faster and easier. Normally I'd look for the best 2 seconds. I'd use the slip tool for that actually. But this way, everything is mathematically the same length. And I'm going to zoom in on my timeline right here. All right. And does everyone see I'm doing this for simple math? 5 clips, 2 seconds long each. I'm going to shorten this. I'm going to make it 1 second long, okay? 5 clips, 2 seconds each. You know what? Let's do it this way. Don't forget up and down. Take it from clip to clip, like cut to cut. I'm going to hit the O key. That's setting my render bar here, out and in. Like if I want to start here, I hit I for in. But I'm going to go to the beginning of my timeline, hit I, in and out. That's my render area. Everyone get that? In and out to set it? Okay, great. Now the middle clip, I'm going to make this 1 second long. So I just go to my timecode. So that's the faster way of working. There's a second, Command K to cut it. Watch what happens. I got a gap. Whenever you got a gap in your timeline, you're going to see black frames. Those are drop frames. You don't want that. Got it? Right click, ripple delete. What happened? Look at the length of my timeline. By how much? Exact. That's the best answer I've ever gotten. Yes. I shortened it 1 second. That made my timeline 1 second shorter. Everyone got that? A ripple edit slides everything in your timeline down by however much that gap is closed. It will change the length of your timeline. So if you're doing a commercial or a music video where it has to be a certain length, you're going to have to find something to fill that gap. Everyone got it? Now, that was a ripple edit. I'm going to go here to my rolling edit tool. Right there. Watch what happens. We shortened the middle clip 1 second. See, there's my playhead right there, still at the same spot. I'm going to grab the edge of these 2 cuts, drag my ripple edit. Oh, wait. It's because there's no cut there. Okay. Interesting. Let's do this. I shortened it a bit. Okay, so I shortened that. So there is footage there now. So now, if I grab this, I've got my timeline the same length. It drew out that longer. It's like pulling a sheet up over you in bed or pulling down a window shade. Does everybody get that? The window stays the same height, but the window shade you're pulling down is changing how much you're seeing outside the window. That's what a rolling edit does. Keeps your timeline the same length. You're just changing 2 sides of a cut at once. So, step number 1. Make sure you're in the right sequence in your timeline. You see how I've got a billion sequences open. The one you're on is the one you're going to render. Everyone got that? Step 2. If you've got any audio, like over here, make sure what's muted should be muted and what you want to hear is not muted. Always check your audio and check your eyeball icons to make sure that your audio is working and everything's turned on. Everyone got that? Step 3, set your render area, your in and out points. You just move the playhead and hit I for in, O for out. Everyone got that? You got your sequence selected. You checked your timeline. You made sure all your footage is where it's at. You set your in and out point. Here's the next step. Click on the export tab right here. What they changed with this round of Premiere is it used to be a pop-up window. So now they've got tabs. So if I'm in the export to render and I go, oh no, I need to go back and unmute the song, I just click on the edit tab and it takes me back to my timeline. So I can say, unmute the song, okay? So I remuted it because I don't want two songs playing at the same time. Export tab. Now, export. Well, what do I do? Well, it depends on what your client wants. If you're doing online posts or social media, you'll want it to be at H.264. H.264 plays on Macs and PCs. It's got some pretty good compression to image quality, and you're good with H.264 high bitrate, okay? Up here's where you name it. And then this blue bar right here, you click there, and that's where you set up where it's going to. You click the blue text to set up your location, hit save, you name your file. H.264, that's good for web graphics and social media, adaptive high bitrate. Over here, source. This was 2K footage. My output, it's 2K footage. The frame rate matches right there, 2997, 2997. So always check and make sure it matches. That's your next step. Range, source, in and out. Right up here, it's showing the in point and the out point in our timeline. Another option is entire source. That's everything in your timeline. Careful, if you want the whole timeline, choose entire source. If you just want a section, choose that. The last step would be the export button. So that's a social media post. Now, say you're sending this to DaVinci Resolve to be color corrected. What I would do then is I put at the end, I put underscore, the number 4, DR, so I know this is going to DaVinci Resolve to be color corrected. So if I'm going to send this for color correction, and color grading, I would change my H.264 to QuickTime. I'm showing you this so you can see a couple options. Now, in the video, there are these settings. I'm going to scroll down a bit until normally you would see more. So I'm going to click more. Mine said less because I already clicked it before. So you click the more, and here's where you get it. Depth. I'm going to change the bit depth to 16-bit. Click on Use Maximum Render Quality, and then I'd export it. You need that extra color information to get your highest quality footage for color grading. This is also something you might want to consider QuickTime if you're doing something where you need lossless quality. So, then when you're done, you hit the export button and you wait for it to render. And then you're all good. So I'm going to go back to my edit tab. So I'm going to go to my B-roll right here. When I'm working on things like B-roll, let me clear my in and out. You can always clear it by right-clicking inside it and clear in and out. I'm going to press the Z for my magnifying tool to zoom in. When I'm going through things like B-roll, I always color code it green, yellow, and red. Red meaning don't use, yellow is maybe, green as yes, definitely use that. You select the clip you want, right-click, choose label, and here's your colors. Now, if you're not getting that option, by default, Premiere will color code the entire clip you've got, not just the cut of it. So to change that, click here on the wrench, and uncheck Show Source Clip Name and Label. With that, you can individually color code each cut rather than it coloring every cut the same.